Good morning. Hope you're having a great week. It is Monday, May 11th, 7:46 a.m. Central Daylight Time, local time here in Oklahoma City. We're gonna do a load board video. I don't know if I'm gonna get around to talking very much about, the freight market and the Iran situation, all that. There hasn't been any significant changes, and I just made like a 2 or 3 hour long video on just that topic. Nothing's really changed with that, so you can go listen to that video if you want to hear my thoughts on the freight market and stuff like that. So this is mainly going to be me looking for a load. Let's go over to the load board here real quick. There was somebody that requested to see loads coming out of the Phoenix area, dry van and power only. So I'll look at those really quick. The I usually look at the number of trucks, the available trucks, to get an idea of what's going on with Landstar's fleet size, and the number of trucks is flat. It was 7,800 trucks last week, and it was 7,700 trucks just a minute ago. But that number fluctuates, and it's Monday, there have been people that have gone out of service over the weekend for various reasons, and the department that puts people back in service is Monday through Friday. So to see a dip over the weekend is normal. So it looks like Landstar's fleet size is remaining flat. And that number is not what their actual fleet size is. I don't have access to the number of trucks leased to Landstar. That's just the number of active trucks, the number of trucks that are not out of service. And it gives me a rough idea of like what's going on with Landstar's fleet size. So another disclaimer before we start looking at loads, all the prices you see on the loads are the full rate. It includes everything. It includes fuel surcharge, drop pay, stop pay, unload pay. If there's detention pay baked in, it's in that. Usually on detention and layover pay, that's something that you discuss after the fact. But if they know for a fact that there's going to be detention or layover in advance, then sometimes that will be listed in the full rate at the beginning of the load. That's quite rare. But anyway, total number of loads 114,658. That number is really, really high. The load count on Landstar's load board jumped up dramatically by about 30,000 loads over the last couple of weeks. And based off the information I've seen, it's mainly just reposted spot market loads. The number of contract loads on Landstar's load board hasn't really changed. So I have to assume that these are all just reposted spot market crap. This tells me most likely that they're having issues moving loads. So we're seeing rising prices on the spot market, and Landstar agents are reposting those onto the load board thinking that they can move them. So yeah, I think this is just a reflection of rising prices on the spot market and difficulty moving loads. So anyway, let's first look at power only. Specialized. No, I don't want to select the entire specialized category. What's going on here? Needing power only. There we go. That's weird how that's popping out like that. So we're doing power only, origin, Phoenix, Arizona. Let's do a 100-mile radius. We don't want to do too big of a radius. And we're not even putting in any other filters, and it's 0 loads already. There are no power only loads within 100 miles of Phoenix. Let's try 150. Still nothing. 0 power only loads. So now let's go to van and container. 1,218 loads. All right, let's get rid of all the spot market crap. Let's go to agent, direct shipper. Yes. Now we're down to 53 loads. I'll scroll through these 53 loads really quick. and then we'll start looking for a load. So this is 150 miles around Phoenix, and this is pretty much all of the dry van and possibly container contract loads. So Casa Grande, Big House, Arizona, going to Kent, Washington. $4 a mile. Gilbert, Arizona to Richmond, Virginia. So most of these loads I'm skimming through here, they look like absolute garbage. But this Gilbert, Arizona to Richmond, Virginia, this would be a good load back, like 3 months ago before the fuel prices started going up. Now I'm not really sure if this is a decent load. And then this Casa Grande to Kent, Arizona, this looks like a pretty good load. Let's take a peek at it. Team. Oh, I forgot to deselect team. This is a team load. Team drivers needed. 12 to 15 pallets of manufactured aircraft parts. Can use a dry van or reefer for these loads. Okay, so that is something I forgot to deselect team. At Landstar, only teams are allowed to haul any kind of critical stuff. So there's an entire category for that type. I forget what they call it. All right, let's go and edit the search, and we'll do team and no team. We'll split the search so we don't get any confusion here. So let's do flags, team, yes. One load. There's only one single team load. So we've already looked at that load. So let's go and do team no. So the only load that looked good was a team load. And I'm not sure if that's a good rate for a team load. So now the rest of this crap, it all is garbage. Like this is all like garbage. Why is it garbage? Okay, so all the prices you see on here, that's the full rate. I get roughly somewhere in the ballpark of 70% of whatever you see here. I get 65% of the line haul and 100% of the fuel surcharge. So a load that pays $2.50 a mile, 70% of that's $1.75 a mile. And $1.75 a mile is the break even for most owner operators by my calculation. So anything that's paying $2.50 a mile or less on the full rate is not a profitable load. So it has to pay a minimum of $2.50 a mile on the full rate just to be profitable for most owner operators. And we're seeing loads there that are below $2.50 or just barely above $2.50. You don't need a whole lot of profit per mile, but you really need to be running profit per mile. It doesn't need to be like $1 a mile profit. You can be very successful as a business running like 25 cents a mile profit. If you're running a $2 a mile gross to the truck average, then you can be very successful in this industry. So like 25 cents a mile business profit is you can be doing quite well with that. That's, after all of your business expenses and paying yourself. If after that's basically all your business expenses and all your personal expenses, after all of that's paid for, if you're making like 25 cents a mile profit after all of that, then you're doing quite well. So $2 a mile is pretty good if you can average $2 a mile profit. But that $1.75 a mile, if we just add in the fuel cost increases, right now the fuel cost increases are like 14.2 cents per mile for every dollar. If you're getting 7 miles per gallon, on average. So fuel prices have gone up by $2 to $3 a gallon. It depends on the area of the country. So we'll say $2 a gallon on average. So that's like 28.4 cents a gallon. So now, instead of $2 a mile being really solid, now you're looking at like $2.28 a mile is really solid. But yeah, all these prices look terrible. So let's just sort by rate per mile because there's so many cheap like dollar a mile loads on here. So we got a short run going to Henderson, Nevada, which I think is Vegas. Mesa to Henderson, Nevada. Electronics. The commodity code ELEC is electronics. Hazmat. FDA is usually food stuff. This is Food and Drug Administration. Oh my goodness. I hate on this new load board that if you click anywhere, it opens up. So FDA is Food and Drug Administration. I think that includes pharmaceuticals. So that could be food or pharmaceuticals. CGAP is consumer goods or appliances, machinery, plastics and rubber, packaging, machinery, building. That's like building materials like wood. Exempt. Exempt, and there's another commodity type for gov. Usually you will see exempt on government loads. So it doesn't have any kind of 19 coolers. So it's probably, I'm not 100% sure what exactly exempt means, but I think it is some kind of hazmat that's exempted. So the coolers probably have freon and other hazardous materials in them, but you're not having to run placards. So yeah, now we're getting into just like loads you don't want to mess with. All right, so now let's go to me looking for a load. So we got container, power van. I want to look at the Portland area. If you follow the channel, no, we don't want to look at Portland, Alabama. Then you know that mainly what I do is I haul loads from Dallas to Portland, back and forth. I just go back and forth between Dallas and Portland, or between the central part of the country and the Seattle Portland area. Why do I do that? Because I can't stand the traffic of the eastern half of the US. I can't stand running short loads. There's a lot of things I don't like. Running in the western half of the United States is not a good business decision. The best business decision as a truck driver is to run eastern half of the United States. That's the reason a lot of trucking companies only run east of I-2935, is because east of I-2935, you don't have to, you're not put into a situation where you have to think about deadheading 1,000 miles for a load. There's freight everywhere. There's not major gaps in between freight hubs. But over in the western half of the United States, it's a massive freight desert. There's just a few places where you can find loads, and those places are not even really good freight markets. Like Salt Lake City is not a good freight market. Denver is not a good freight market. Billings, Montana is not a good freight market. Boise, Idaho is not a good freight market. Phoenix, Arizona is a mediocre freight market. So, like, there are little oases in that freight desert, like Phoenix and Las Vegas and Reno and Salt Lake and Boise and places like that. But they're not like good places to be looking for loads. It's just that if you deliver a load out into, nowhere, Montana, then you're probably going to have to go to Billings to find a load. And Billings is a terrible place to be looking for a load. You might have to deadhead from, Billings, Montana. You might have to deadhead all the way to another state to find a load. I'm not sure where the nearest decent freight market is from Billings, Montana. I'd have to look at a map. But yeah, you have to be very careful running in the western half of the United States because it's just such a freight desert. There's so few loads coming out of areas that like they're listed on the load board for like 80 cents a mile, $1 a mile. It's ridiculously cheap. It's cheaper to probably just deadhead and get higher mile per gallon on fuel cost than it is to haul loads at those prices. Let me see if my coffee's cooled off enough to drink. Yep. Like let me switch this over to just me. You can see my coffee coloring here. I like a splash of coffee with my cream and sugar. All right, so I want to check and see what the loads are like coming out of the Portland area, because the loads going into Portland are paying decent. They're not paying amazing, but they're paying decent. So let's see if I can make any money coming out of the Portland area. All right, let's also put a max weight on here so we don't get any overweight loads. Oh, wow, we lost 10 loads. When I put in a max weight of 45,000 pounds, 10 loads disappeared. So there were 10 loads over 45,000 pounds. I'm curious. Let's look at those loads. Are they like 46,000 pounds? Let's sort by weight. Okay, so they're just barely over 45,000 pounds. 45,227 pounds. Packaging material. Crocker, Washington to Hayesville, Oregon. These are short 100-mile loads that are just really cheap crap loads. And I'm recognizing the agent, the UNV agency, and for some reason I'm thinking that's an agent that I commonly see crap loads from. That's something that you'll get used to on Landstar's load board, is that there are certain agents that consistently post decent loads and certain agents that consistently post bad loads. All right, let's go back up here and put the 45,000 back in. I can't haul a 45,000 pound load. My truck is a little bit heavier than a normal truck. I just can't haul it. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't do it. All right, so now we're sorting by revenue, total amount that the load pays. So we got Independence, Oregon to Savannah, Georgia, paying $250 a mile with 5 extra stops on it. So if it says 5 stops there, that does not include your final stop. These are just extra stops. So it's 6 total deliveries. Here's State and Oregon, Compton, California, 38 stops. Can you guess what that load is? ROR agency, that's a Jeld-Wen window load. $5.12 per mile. Not actually a very good load. And it's been sitting on the load board for 9 hours and 25 minutes. I think they've actually reposted this load onto the load board multiple times, because over the last few weeks, I've seen this California load several times. So what they'll do is, if this load doesn't get covered, they'll pull it off the load board and then they'll repost it in a few days. They don't typically do these window loads. They go to home improvement stores like Lowe's, Home Depot, and Menards. And they don't do window loads like on a daily basis to these stores. You know, they'll get window loads. I'm not sure of the exact frequency, but it's like once a month or once every 2 months that they'll have one of these Jeld-Wen loads going to these places. It's not like a consistent thing where they're doing multiple loads per week to California. It's usually like 1 load every month to California. Maybe 2 loads a month. So to see, you know, a California load reposted every week, that's telling me that they are not covering the load. It's just getting reposted because it's not getting covered. All right, let's scroll through here, see what else we got. A lot of loads below operating cost. Yeah. Here's one for $4.37 a mile going from Independence, Oregon to Anna Cortez, Washington. It's a short little load, paying $1,300, 2 extra stops on it. I mean, it's a mediocre load. It's not very good. Here's another Washington to Washington load, 300 miles, paying $4 a mile. Not very good. So yeah, we're getting down into the short miles that are paying higher rate per mile, but they're really short runs. You know, like 100 miles paying $5 a mile. That's not a good load. I mean, to just break down the numbers for somebody to give somebody a rough idea, let's look at this Lacey, Washington to Portland, Oregon load. It's 115 miles, 535 a mile, paying $615. So because it's such low mileage, they're most likely not going to pay fuel surcharge. Brokers will typically not even bother with fuel surcharge unless the load's over a certain number of miles. So short mileage loads, you're not getting 70%. You're getting the 65% because it's not likely going to have fuel surcharge on it. Let's drill into it and see if they did put fuel surcharge on it. Well, right there it says no, but that doesn't mean a lot of the times these agents, they really half-ass these load listings. They just don't bother to put all the information on there. So it might actually pay fuel surcharge, but usually on really short mileage loads, they won't even bother putting fuel surcharge on it. And if you ask for fuel surcharge, they'll get like condescending, and they'll be jackasses about it. A lot of these agents are quite rude. Brokers can be extremely rude. So anyway, 65%. So $615. 615 times 0.65. So that's $399.75. And then it's going to cost you about, fuel cost over on the West Coast right now is, the fuel surcharge is like 91 cents a mile. It's going to cost you approximately $1 a mile to move the truck. So let's subtract $115 for 115 miles. That's $284.75 is what you're going to make on that load, just after your fuel cost. And it's going to take you a day to do this load. It is listed as a same day delivery. So hopefully it only takes you one single day to do this load. What is the daily cost for these trucks? Well, $1,200 a week is fairly normal for fixed costs for a truck. So let's figure out what that is by daily. That's $171.43 on a 7-day week. So $1,200 a week on a 7-day week. That's $172.43. So 284.75 minus 171.43 comes out to $113.32. You would make approximately $113.32 profit. That does not include paying yourself. So if you factor in 60 cents a mile to pay yourself, then like that's another 115 times 0.6. That's another $69. So 113.32 minus 69, that comes up with $44.32. $44.32 profit to the business. That's less than employees make. Like, I made more than that in my old job before I got into trucking. And most truck drivers make more than that. Like, that's less than a company driver. That's just, these short mileage runs can be very deceptive. And a lot of times these short mileage runs will waste an extra day of your time. Like, it's not just a 1-day run. It'll be like a 2-day run for a 200-mile load. And these brokers won't tell you stuff like that. Because if they told you that up front, you wouldn't take the load. They like to, backload that negative information. All right, so let's go back up here and look at this Staten, Oregon to Compton, California load. And let's see what the ROR agency is paying. So what is the fuel surcharge that they're paying? Let's check it out. So it is, let's see. They're paying 60 cents a mile fuel surcharge. The fuel surcharge rate in, let me switch this over to me and let me check what the current fuel surcharge is, because we should have a new fuel surcharge report. I think they got rid of the old report. There was the old report was a lot simpler. But yeah, this new fuel surcharge report, it looks like the fuel surcharge has remained kind of flat. The national average is the same, 76 cents per mile, and the West Coast it went up by 1 cent per mile. It's now 92 cents per mile. So the way this works is that if you have a load that's going across several regions, then what the agent is supposed to do is calculate how much you're driving in each region and use that to determine what your fuel surcharge is. So if you're picking up a load in Portland, which is at the 92 cent per mile fuel surcharge, and you're taking it to Dallas, then Dallas is in the 76 cent per mile. Actually, I'd have to look and see what exactly Dallas is. This is a really long report. It's, I don't know, like a 30-page report. And it doesn't have the Midwest. It just has national average, New England, Rocky Mountain, and West Coast. So it looks like Dallas would fall into national average. Rocky Mountain is 73 cents per mile. It is below national average, and everything else is above national average. So anyway, yeah, they would just figure out like how much you're driving through each region and use that to determine. So you should be somewhere in between 76 and 92 cents a mile going from Portland to Dallas. It would probably be somewhere in halfway in between there. So like 83 cents per mile would probably be 83, 85 cents a mile would probably be like fairly normal fuel surcharge for going from Portland to Dallas. But like a really good agent might just give you 92 cents a mile for that whole drive. But anyway, let's go back over here to Jeld-Wen, and they are paying 60 cents a mile, and it should be the entire load is West Coast. It's Oregon and California. This entire load is in West Coast. So it should be paying 92 cents per mile fuel surcharge. It's only paying 60 cents per mile. This is the issue that I had with the Jeld-Wen account, is that the last load that I did before I came home was one of these Jeld-Wen window loads, and it was after the fuel prices had gone up dramatically. The fuel prices had gone up by like $1.50 a gallon, and they would not raise the fuel surcharge. They were sticking to the contract rate of like 45 cent per mile fuel surcharge. And the fuel surcharge rate at that time was somewhere around, I think, 70 cents a mile. And they were only paying 45 cents a mile. And the agent told me that Jeld-Wen controlled the fuel surcharge per contract. The agent had no control over fuel surcharge. All they could do would be to ask Jeld-Wen if they would raise the fuel surcharge. And they said that they've already been asking Jeld-Wen to raise the fuel surcharge, and they won't. So it looks like Jeld-Wen has finally raised the fuel surcharge above the 45 cent per mile contract rate up to 60 cents a mile, which is still ridiculously cheap. And the line haul pay is, I did the math on one of these loads in my last load board video, and none of the contract prices had changed on the load. They were still paying $2 a mile on the line haul, which is we only get 65% of the line haul. So these loads are only paying $1.30 a mile gross to the truck. And then they're paying 60 cents a mile fuel surcharge. So these loads are paying $1.90 a mile to the truck if you do not factor in any of the stop pay or unload pay. And that's what I mean when I talk about a shell game. I had somebody, another Landstar driver, get really defensive in the comment section when I said, when I talked about the shell game that these companies play with the numbers. Because they have to pay so much money on stop and unload pay, they shift the money out of line haul over to stop and unload pay. So they reduce the amount that they're paying on line haul. So because these are multi-stop loads where they're always going to be paying lots of stop and unload pay, they have negotiated a really cheap line haul rate where they're only paying $2 a mile line haul. And that's the reason these rates look decent, is because of only the stop and unload pay. These things pay next to nothing on mileage. So yeah, it's these are really cheap bad loads, and the only way that they pay any decent money is just on the stops. You get $25 for a driver assist on every unload, and then you get $50 for every extra stop. You don't get paid for the final stop. You only get paid for the extra stop. So there's 38 extra stops. You get $50 for each one of those. And then you get $25 for every single stop, all 39, to help unload. And it's been my experience on these loads that you don't help unload, you unload. I'm only supposed to be like helping them unload and like dealing with the straps, securement, making sure that they take the correct windows, stuff like that, looking for damage. These loads are like really involved on the unload part. So I'm only supposed to be doing all that, and $25 is really cheap for me to spend time doing all that. But I actually usually end up unloading the entire trailer myself by hand. And the only time I really get help is whenever I have a window so big that I can't move it myself. One of these big sliding glass doors or something that weighs 300 pounds, and I have to go find someone and beg them to come into the trailer and help me unload it. That's been my experience with these loads, is that I end up unloading them myself. And $25 is not adequate. What is that? What's the total? They got it right here. For 38 stops, what is the unloading pay? $1,175 to unload the trailer. That is not enough money for a hand unload of one of these trailers. You're talking about like probably two full days of just unloading a trailer to hand unload one of these window trailers that's like, completely full of windows. All right, so let's think about this. Let's go back to load search, and let's edit the criteria. What is this search? Oh, that's the old load board. Let's do a minimum revenue of $6,000. Because I don't want to look at the loads that are running up and down the I-5 corridor. because I can't go into California. I'm illegal in California. So I basically only want to see the loads that are going back to the central or eastern part of the country. Just a second here. Let me switch this back over to me because the load board just logged me out. It doesn't seem to, like the new load board that they just released a few weeks ago, it does not seem to track your activity. It's just over a certain amount of time after you log in, it just kicks you off. All right, now I've refreshed the page and we're back up. So even if you're actively doing stuff on the load board, it'll just punch you out. So let's see what we got going on here. Independence, Oregon to Savannah, Georgia. So nothing is changing with the window loads. There's a lot of things to consider on the window loads. One, they might not be available by the time I get there. This is something that I talked about in my last, whenever I was doing the deliveries on the loads, is that what I've been doing when I'm doing these window deliveries is I started hearing rumors a long time ago that like Jeld-Wen could be going out of business. So the last load that I delivered, I asked almost every place that I delivered, what have they heard about the Jeld-Wen account? And a lot of people said that they had no idea. They were just, shipping and receiving people that load and unload trailers. But the few people that I did talk to that were familiar with it, every single one of them told me that they had stopped using Jeld-Wen. No one stocks Jeld-Wen on the shelves anymore. The only, as far as Lowe's, Home Depot, and Menards, now this may be different in different parts of the country. I delivered across Oklahoma and Kansas, and they have all stopped stocking. I think it's like a company-wide thing, but there might be, regions of the country that are different. But from what I understand, no one stocks Jeld-Wen on the shelf anymore. That would be Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards. None of those three. I don't know if there's anyone else that Jeld-Wen sells the windows to, but those three, all three of them told me that they no longer stock Jeld-Wen on the shelves. Every single window that I was delivering was a customer shipped to store. These were customers that were ordering windows online through like Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards website and having it shipped to the store. And Lowe's, Home Depot, and Menards, all three of them told me that they were in the process of finding a replacement for Jeld-Wen. Once they find a replacement for Jeld-Wen, I forget who it was that told me that they were like really close to signing a new contract with somebody. I forgot who told me that. I think it might have been Menards that told me that. I'm not sure. I talked about it in my, delivery videos. But once they sign with a new budget window company, they might not offer Jeld-Wen on their website anymore. You might not even be able to do customer ship to store with Jeld-Wen products. Lowe's, Home Depot, and Menards are just tired of dealing with Jeld-Wen. What I heard from everyone, I got the exact same complaints from everyone, is that the windows show up missing parts and they show up with incorrect parts. So like the window will be missing the window screen, or it'll be missing some kind of flashing or something. It'll be missing something, or it'll have the wrong part. Like it'll have a window screen, but the window screen doesn't fit the window. It's too small and it just falls out of the window. Stuff like that. They're just tired of dealing with Jeld-Wen. Just horrible build quality. And I talked with somebody that had been with Home Depot for a long time, and they said that Jeld-Wen used to be pretty good. And they said that the big problem they had with Jeld-Wen was when they started shipping the windows out of a new location. So the Staten, Oregon location, I'm not sure when that place started up, but a Home Depot person told me that that's when the build quality went down. So the Staten, Oregon location is, I'm not sure if somebody bought out the company or if they just switched to a new location. I don't know what the history is on Jeld-Wen, but whenever they started making windows at the Staten, Oregon location, the build quality just went to absolute crap. And that's the reason they're probably going to go out of business. So that is a big concern. So what I'm thinking right now is, first of all, the window loads coming out of the Portland area, Staten, Oregon, that's about the only thing that's profitable coming out of that area. And it doesn't pay that well. It actually is not a profitable load if you take away all of the stop and unload pay. The only thing that makes it profitable is that they're paying you like, you know, a couple $1,000s for stop and unload pay. That stop and unload pay is supposed to be extra, but it's not. It's a shell game. That's the only thing that actually pays on this load. The actual, you know, line haul pay on this load is next to nothing. You know, just think about it this way. If this did not have any stop or unload pay on it, would you even bother booking the load? This load would be $2.60 a mile on the load board. It would pay $1.90 a mile to the truck. Would you even bother booking that load? I wouldn't. And that's only because fuel prices are so high, and they had to increase the fuel surcharge. The fuel, normally, without the 15 cent per mile increase in fuel surcharge, this load would be paying, it would be $2.45 per mile on the full rate. And it would be $1.30 plus 45. So that would be $1.75 a mile gross to the truck. So this is basically a break-even load. So back before the fuel prices went up, this would be a break-even load. So this load is basically the line haul on this load. The actual pay on the load is just a break-even load. So your only profit is from the stop and unload pay. If they didn't have that stop and unload pay on there, they would be forced to increase the line haul. But because they have all that stop and unload pay, they're able to pay really cheap on the line haul and make up for it on. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about a shell game. Is that these companies, if they have to pay extra for something, they usually take it down somewhere else. It's just moving money around. It's not actual extra. Not every company is like that. But imagine how nice this load would be if it was paying a reasonable rate per mile, you know, like $2.75 a mile back before fuel prices went up. And now with fuel prices going up, it would be paying like an extra 45 cents a mile in fuel surcharge. So $2.75 plus 45, that'd be 25 and 20. So that'd be $3.20 a mile line haul on the full rate. And you're getting, you know, you'd be getting more than 70% of that because the fuel surcharge is so high. But you're looking at $3, and this load should be paying somewhere in the ballpark of $3.20 a mile before all the stop and unload pay. Just with line haul and fuel surcharge, this thing should be paying around $3.20 a mile. But what it's paying is $2.60 a mile. That's a huge difference. 60 cents a mile is a lot of money. So there are good paying loads going to the Portland area. The problem I have to think about is getting out of the Portland area. Is it worth the risk to go in there with fuel prices as high as they are? It's upwards of $6.50 a gallon right now. Let's check it out. See what it is today. right, cheapest place in Portland, in the Portland area, is the TA in Aurora. And the pump price is $6.15 plus 6 cents a gallon. It's $6.22 roughly, $6.22 a gallon. The Landstar discount is $1.49. Well, let me switch this over to the big picture and show you. Come on, focus. There we go. So the pump price is $6.15. That includes a 6 cent per gallon discount for fuel card or cash. So $6.15 and 9/10. So basically $6.16 a gallon plus 6 cents is $6.22 a gallon pump price. Landstar discounts $1.49 a gallon. And Portland does not charge fuel tax at the pump. They still charge fuel tax. They just don't charge it at the pump. They have their own fuel mileage system. And I can't remember what their fuel tax is, but Oregon fuel prices look deceptively cheap because they don't charge fuel tax at the pump, even though they still charge you for it. So that's one of the reasons that I look at raw fuel price, is because the fuel taxes in each state are different, and some states don't charge fuel tax at all. And you could end up paying a lot more in the long run. I just want to know how much the fuel costs raw, without tax, after discount. Because I pay the same fuel tax no matter what. We're on a fuel mileage system. We pay fuel taxes based off the number of miles we drive in each state. So it doesn't really matter. When I pay fuel tax at the pump, all I'm doing is prepaying my taxes. So anyway, let's refresh this. Not a lot of movement on the board. So yeah, the big two things I need to consider with going to up there is the only loads that are profitable coming out of there are these Jeld-Wen loads. These are the only loads that are consistently profitable. And they're pain in the ass loads. They suck. And my concern is, are they still profitable? Can I still make money off the loads? And yes, it looks like I can still make money off the loads. These are huge mileage loads because of all of the stops on them. Like generally, the loads that I take that deliver in the Kansas, Oklahoma area, those are usually like around 3,500 mile loads, and they're paying like $10,000-$12,000, and they're like 40 stop loads. So yes, those loads are profitable. They're not as profitable anymore because the fuel prices have gone up dramatically, and Jeld-Wen is slightly increasing the fuel surcharge, but not very much. So yes, I'm not going to make as much profit as I used to make. So as far as profitability, that's still there. I can still make money off of the window loads. But here's the other big question. Are the loads going to be there when I get there? And that's a big question mark, because I think Jeld-Wen is on the verge of going out of business. And the last couple of weeks that I've been looking at the load board, I haven't seen any window loads going to the Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas area. So I think that, you know what, let me pause this and let me look at Home Depot's website and see if you can even buy Jeld-Wen windows on their website anymore. Let me check real quick. All right, I don't think there's any personal information on this page. So this is a Home Depot page. So yes, I found Jeld-Wen on Home Depot. This is for my Home Depot store a mile down the road here in Oklahoma City. You can order Jeld-Wen windows shipped to store. 130 are ready to ship. There's 130 of these windows already made, ready to ship. And they say that if you order it right now, it'll be delivered somewhere between May 19th and the 21st. So that's 10 days. From the moment you order it until the moment it arrives in the store, 10 days. I don't think that's possible. They might be shipping these using some kind of different method. Because usually the way they do these loads is that whenever you book one of these window loads, you typically book it like several days in advance. And it takes them usually 3, 4, 5 days just to load the trailer. So if this customer were to order this window today, then it could be a week before the trailer's ready to move, and there's no way that it's going to be delivered to the store within 3 days. So there must be some. Let's click on ship to store, and let's see what kind of shipping method. See if they have anything about shipping on here. Let me switch back over here because when I click on checkout, it might like pull up some personal information about me. Yeah, I don't really want to go too deep. I'm not sure if it's actually going to process the order if I click the next button, because we're already in the cart and I'm trying to click on checkout so that I can get shipping information. I'm not sure when it's actually going to charge my credit card. But it's wanting me to log in to go any further, and I really don't want to do that because it might actually bill me. All right, so they're still available for ship to store. So these loads might possibly be available on a backhaul. Let's go take a peek at what's available to go into. So instead of city, they have CY, and this is not forgiving. On the phone app, you can type in partial stuff and it'll guess at what it does, like normal searches. This is a very strict search on this new app, which is taking a step backwards 20 years. All right, Oklahoma City, we want to go down to 250 miles. We'll go all the way to 300 miles. Looking for loads that are paying over $6,000. There's 12 loads. So let's see what we got here. Fort Smith, Arkansas to Milwaukee, Oregon. This is the LTL agency coming out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. So this is the Ream Rude account, which this is one of the accounts that I've been taking to the Portland, Seattle area for a while. The last several times I've left the house, these are the loads I've hauled, mainly out of the Dallas area, Lewisville, Texas. I haven't seen any listed out of Fort Smith, Arkansas for a while. I wasn't even sure they were still running loads out of Fort Smith. But they negotiated a new contract at a significantly lower price just a few months ago. How do I know that? Because I called to book a load that was listed at like $8,000. I booked the load, and then about 15 minutes later, after I booked the load, they called me and they said that the load was listed in error at the old contract price, and they had just negotiated a new contract within the last few days, and they were going to have to cancel the load off of me, and they asked me if I wanted to book the load at the new contract rate, which was $2,000 less. So it went from $8,000 to I can't remember the exact price. I want to say it was like $7,200, and it went down to $5,200. I remember it was a $2,000 difference. It was $2,000 cheaper. So it was basically $1 a mile less. Because it was like a 2,100 mile load, 2,200 mile load that was paying about $2,000 less. So it was, there's been a significant, like the new contract that they just negotiated is a significantly cheaper contract. So Fort Smith, Arkansas to Milwaukee, Oregon, $3.55 a mile. It has 2 extra stops on it. This is normal for the Ream Rude loads because generally what you're doing is you're delivering to small businesses that are like air conditioner shops, and you'll deliver to 2 or 3 of them. All right, let's drill down and take a peek at this. There was a load on here that I was thinking about booking. Uh, it was one of Don Flores's loads, the DDB agency, the Maddox account, which is retail shelving units out of Terrell, Texas, Dallas area. She had a load on here for a little over $8,000 that was going to Clackamas, Portland. And I was thinking about booking that load. It'd been sitting on the load board for a day or two, and it's gone. So somebody booked that load. All right, so let's figure out what they're paying on fuel surcharge. Pull up a calculator. 15, 13, 30 divided by the mileage, 2045, comes up to 74 cents per mile. That is below, they're paying cheap on the fuel surcharge. They should be paying somewhere closer to like 83, 85 cents per mile, probably 84 cents a mile. But, you know, that's a lot of these customers, they cut every corner they can. So it's fairly common for contract freight to pay below, on fuel surcharge. Don Flores on the Maddox account. That's one of the reasons I like Dawn is she pays whatever the fuel surcharge rate is at Landstar. That's what she charges her customers. So she pays actual fuel surcharge. And whenever you book a load with her, if the fuel surcharge changes before you pick the load up, she will send you a new freight bill with that update. And it can go up or it can go down. But I think the fuel surcharge gets locked in after you pick the load up. But up until the moment you pick the load up, the fuel surcharge can change on the load. And she'll send you new freight bills every time it changes. And I'm pretty sure she goes off of like Landstar's fuel surcharge rate. Not 100% sure on that. Okay, so they're paying 74 cents a mile fuel surcharge, was it? Let me double check. Yeah, 74. That's not horrible, but it's also not very good. So let's see what they're paying on their line haul. So they're paying $2.75 per mile on the line haul. So these are decent loads. That's decent. They're not paying a premium though. That's just like a solid mediocre rate. Like all these numbers look decent until you consider that it's going to the Pacific Northwest. The Seattle-Portland area is a bad place to take loads. Anytime you go into a bad freight market like Colorado or Florida or the Pacific Northwest, the loads need to pay a premium because the loads coming out of those areas are typically not profitable. And this load is not paying a premium. It's just paying a solid mediocre rate. Like if this were going to a mediocre freight market, like someplace decent, then this would be a good load. But going into the Pacific Northwest, with especially as high as the fuel prices are over there, and with the freight volume declining, this is a really risky load. What you think you might be getting in profit could easily be wiped out, depending on what load you get coming out of the Seattle-Portland area. This, I'm not really tempted to haul. The load that Don Flores had posted was at $3.91 per mile, and I was tempted to book that load. It still wasn't paying enough where I was like, oh, I'm getting that load. To put this into some kind of context, let's go ahead and close out of this load window. Let me switch back over to me while I refresh the page because it's timed me out again. Back when the freight market was at all-time high, the loads that I was hauling from Dallas to the Portland area were consistently in like the $8,000 to $10,000 range on the full rate before the percentage cuts. 8 to 10 grand. Now that we're in a bad freight market, what I see the loads consistently posted at are in the $5,000 to $7,000 range on the full rate. And with the increased fuel prices that we've had, where they're paying more in fuel surcharge right now, I'm starting to see them go from 5 to 7 to like 6 to 8. but you're not actually making any extra money. It's all just getting eaten up in fuel surcharge. The fuel prices have gone up. The fuel surcharge has gone up, but the fuel surcharge on a lot of these loads has not gone up at the same rate that the fuel prices have gone up. So it's if you're not running the numbers, then you don't realize that these loads, even though they're paying more, you're making less because your fuel cost is going up to here and the fuel surcharge is only going up to here. So yeah, the loads are paying more, but you're making less on them. Let me make sure I have do not disturb. I do have it on do not disturb. I want to make sure that I hear the ding if a load comes in. All right, so not seeing a whole lot of movement on the loads coming out of the Dallas area. So let's do a new search. You know what? Let's leave this page. I just realized I haven't switched. Make at least one change to the search. Let's leave that one. And let's do a new search. And let's switch this back over to the load board. Okay. We're going to do a new search window. And we're going to do power only. Specialized. Needing power only. 108 loads. There are only 108 loads across all of Landstar. We're going to do direct customer only. Usually power only loads are all only contract loads, but there might be a couple of spot market loads on here. Oh yeah, we lost a lot of loads. It went from 108 down to 65 whenever we got rid of the spot market loads. And all that might have just been one single load. That's how the spot market is. You might have one single load listed 40 times on Landstar's load board. That's the reason I typically don't even bother looking at spot market loads. There's lots of negative things about them like that. All right, 65 loads. Let's go to team, and let's just do team no. 65 down to 57. We lost 8 loads. Any other flags? I might want to do a max weight flag, but let's not do that. There's only 57 loads. Let's look through them. 57 power only loads. Why am I searching for power only? Because this is usually where you find dedicated runs. All right, Cincinnati, Ohio to Cincinnati, Ohio. There are 15 of these loads listed. I think this is the Cincinnati to Kansas City load that I looked at earlier. On my last load board video, I called on this load and I got details. I got load details on this load. I'm actually still considering doing this load. Rochester, New York to Rochester, New York. Let's take a peek at that. I am not doing a New York load. I don't go that deep into the Northeast. But let's take a peek at it for somebody else that might be interested. It's been sitting on the load board for 4 days, and I recognize the agency, the GAO agency, and I can't remember why, but I remember that this is an agency that lists crap loads. So it has 3 stops, so it's between Rochester, New York, and Newark, New Jersey. Just going back and forth between those. Paying $3.53 a mile on the full rate. And they don't have any comments on this. I think this is some kind of dedicated run because I remember seeing this on the load board a lot. I've seen it on the load board in the past. Muncie, Indiana to Muncie, Indiana. MEC, I think that stands for mechanical or something. I can't remember what MEC stands for. No comments. It's going from Muncie, Indiana to Eastridge, Tennessee, and back. They have no comments on it. So we don't know if this is like a dedicated run. Explosives 1.4, non-US government. So 1.4 explosives are like the lowest end explosives. This can be fireworks. We are getting close to July 4th, the July 4th holiday. So this is probably fireworks. They're, going to start getting fireworks into stores, into the fireworks stands, and they'll start selling fireworks like a month before July 4th, 1 or 2 months before July 4th. Albuquerque to Albuquerque. Let's see what this says. What's the agency? It's that GAO agency again. They have tons of these loads. So this looks like a dedicated run. And I haven't seen this on the board before. So this might be some new contract, or maybe they had somebody running this dedicated run and they stopped doing it. So this is Albuquerque to El Paso and then turn around and go back. That sounds like an awesome run. Just I-25 between Albuquerque and El Paso. That sounds amazing. I would love to do that. Just back and forth. And let's see what the pay breakdown is. The fuel surcharge is $331 for 549 miles. Let's try to figure out what I think this is. So 331 divided by 549. They're paying 60 cents a mile in fuel surcharge. And if we take 1818.27 minus 331.08, that's 1487.19, and I get 65% of that. So let's figure out what that is mileage wise. They're paying $2.70 a mile. It's like almost 271 a mile. So they're paying 270. So because this is not an even number, that tells me that the mileage that they listed on the load board is not the same that's on the contract, or this is two separate loads that are just packaged together that are at two different rates. That's the reason these numbers are not jiving. There's something, the numbers here are not exactly the same as the numbers on the contract. That's what, these numbers would be even numbers. They wouldn't be like 2.708907103. They wouldn't be like this long ass number. They would be even numbers if all of the information on the load board were correct. So we should still be able to get a ballpark of what's going on here. So what would I be making on this load? Let's figure out what I would make on the load and how many of them I would be able to do per week. So let's see here. Let's go back 18.27 times 0.65. So I would be making no, wait a second, that's not it. No, let me start all over. So 18.27 minus 331.08. I should do this in a spreadsheet. This would be so much easier to do in an Excel spreadsheet. So now we're at 1487 times 0.65. That's 966.67. Plus I get the 100% of the fuel surcharge, which is 331.08. So I would be making $1,300 per run, $1,297.75. Divide that by the mileage, 549. I would be making $236 per mile. $236 per mile. How many runs can I do in a week? So let's go back here and look and see what they have listed here. Holy crap. Some of these have been listed for 66 days, 58 days, 3 days. So May 19th, May 26th, June 2nd, June 9th, June 16th, June 23rd, June 30th. It looks like they only have one of these loads per week. Because you look at August 4th, 11th, 18th, 25th, they're all a week apart. But these agents are horrible at, load listings. Some of these agents don't put enough information, and some put too much, and some lie. So this might actually be a weekly dedicated where you're doing this just all week long, but they only list it once, or they might only have one of these loads per week. Let's give them a call real quick and just find out. Hello, Candace. My name is Daniel. I'm calling to get information on a load you have listed, Albuquerque to Albuquerque. It's going to Albuquerque, El Paso, and then back to Albuquerque. You have a whole bunch of them listed. Load number? Yes, 10498235. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them listed. What I was trying to find out is I'm looking at the dates you have them listed, and it looks like they're all about a week apart. So is this just like a load that you have once per week, or is this like, can you do multiple of them per week? It looks like a dedicated run, and I was just trying to figure out if it's only like one of these per week, or if it's more than one per week, or what's going on with it. Oh, okay. But there are drivers that are doing like multiple of these loads per week. Okay, so in the future, if one of them goes away, this might be a possibility to do a whole bunch of these loads in a week. Okay, all right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye. All right, so let me put my phone on the charger. It's down to 27%. Right now, they only have the one load per week, but they have several drivers that are running this load that are running multiple loads per week. So if one of those drivers disappears, then this could be a weekly dedicated where you're running several of these loads per week. So right now they only have the one load that runs on Tuesday. Now, one thing that's concerning that I forgot to ask her about is that it has a pickup of August 4th and a delivery of August 6th. And it's only 549 miles. This is a same day delivery. You can do this load in one day, but they have it listed for like 3 days. That's not good. So this is a potential dedicated run, but there it's yeah, they have people already running it right now. They don't have enough volume. They have more loads than what their current drivers can haul, but they don't have enough loads for another driver to come on and run full time. and I can't afford to make $1,000 a week. All right, let's see what else we got. Mm. You know, I've already looked at these Cincinnati loads, but let's see if there's been any new information posted on them. So it looks like they reposted them 2 hours ago. And it looks like nothing has changed on these loads. Let me pull up my spreadsheet and see if the prices still jive. So 32.35 was the total amount the load was paying. And it's listed at 32.62 now. Let's increase the fuel surcharge to 805. That brings it up to 32.40. They told me last week that the fuel surcharge this week was going to go to $805. So 32.40. And they have it listed at 32.62, so it sounds like it's gone up by even more. But I'm not sure where that number's coming from. Let me punch in some different fuel surcharge. Let's do All right, so 32.62 would be $827 in fuel surcharge. That would be 68 cents a mile, almost 69 cents per mile. So maybe that's what it is, the fuel surcharge. They said last week when I talked to them that it was going up to $805. So maybe it actually went up to $827. Maybe the fuel surcharge went up much higher than they were anticipating. Ford, this is a Ford contract. Ford is the one that determines fuel surcharge, not the Landstar agent. And the fuel surcharge that they're paying is only 69 cents per mile, which it should be 76 cents per mile according to Landstar. So they're paying 7 cents per mile. Even at $827, they're paying 7 cents per mile fuel surcharge. 7 cents per mile less fuel surcharge than what they should be paying. So even at $827, significantly higher than what it was last week. I think it was $800 last week, and they told me it was going to $805 this week. It looks like it actually went to $827. So it doesn't look like anything has changed except the fuel surcharge went up on this load more than they were anticipating. And they have tons of these loads listed. So let's look at a couple other loads, and we'll come back and look at this. I'm still debating on whether or not to do this load. Now I'll show you the spreadsheet. I'll show you the math on that load, and it looks really good if you're not looking at the whole picture of the business and everything. But once you look at the entire picture, it's not as good as it looks on paper because it's a really high mileage run. Think of it this way. There are people out there that get into trucking because they see these advertisements, where you can make $54,000 a year. The average starting pay for a truck driver is or the average pay of a truck driver is $54,000 a year. And, these are people that are making like $20,000, $30,000 a year. And they're like, oh my goodness, I can make $50,000 a year as a truck driver. That sounds awesome. And I don't think that's, wrong. It's misleading, but I don't think that's incorrect. What's misleading about it is that these recruiters for these trucking companies do not explain to people that truck drivers average probably about 90 hours working per week. You can only log 70 hours worked per week, but there is an expectation in the trucking industry that even when you're working, you will log as off duty or in the sleeper berth, even when you're working. So you're going to typically log close to 70 hours a week worked. And then there's going to be 10 to 20 hours off the clock that you worked. That's normal in this industry. So what they don't explain to people, the context around that $50,000 a year, is that you're basically working two jobs. You're working the number of hours that you would be working two jobs. So just go get two jobs. If you're thinking about getting into trucking to make twice as much money as you're making right now, just go get another job. And it would be exactly the same as trucking. It would actually be easier than trucking. You'd have access to a shower every day. You wouldn't be living in a closet. So yeah, the context is important. Just looking at how much you're making, that's not a full picture. That's the reason so many people get into trucking and then they get out of trucking, is because they get into trucking thinking, oh man, I can make $50,000 a year. And then they're like, I don't have a life because I'm working 90 hours a week. And I'm only getting 2 days off a month, and the company is fighting me for that 2 days a month. They're not even giving me a full 2 days off per month. Yeah, it's really bad. The industry is terrible. So yeah, looking at the business side and, the full context around that dedicated run, yes, the total amount of money is good. Let's go look at the spreadsheet real quick. I have a whole bunch of spreadsheets open. So let's close out of this one. Now let's close out of this one so that it pulls up the right spreadsheet. So I crunched the numbers on that dedicated run. And yeah, it looks really good. Let me scroll over here a little bit. I'm not going to bother messing with the Zoom, so I apologize if you can't read this. But yeah, they said that the average is 2.5 loads per week. So 2.5 loads per week would be $6,024 and roughly 37 cents gross to the truck. And then after just fuel cost, that would be $3,881.51 per week. So I could make $3,800 per week doing that dedicated run. But it is really high mileage. It's 3,000 miles a week. So I'm putting a lot of wear and tear on the truck, which is going to increase my maintenance and repair costs. And maintenance and repairs on these trucks is really, really expensive. You can easily get a $5,000 repair. A $15,000 unexpected repair sucks. But $500, $1,000, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Blown tires, a blown hose, little things like $500 to $1,000 in repairs. Those are considered little things that consistently happen. The $5,000 repairs happen on occasion, and then every once in a while you'll have one of those $15,000 repairs. So if you're putting a lot of miles on the truck, you're trading off your vehicle for money now. With this dedicated run, you're not making like very good money. You're just exchanging your vehicle for money now. It's basically like taking a loan on your vehicle because you're not very profitable on these prices. Yeah, $3,800 a week. I can make $3,800 a week. But then I could have a breakdown because I'm putting such high mileage on the truck, and the truck could be down for a month, and it could cost me 5 or 10 grand. And then all of a sudden, all that money that I made on that run is just gone. So yeah, it's not that great. It's not horrible. And if I'm able to do 3 runs per week, then it goes up to 4,600 per week, but it's also 3,600 miles per week. That's a lot of miles in a week. So $3,800 per week after just fuel cost. The fuel cost is quite crazy. If you just think about that, the load is paying $6,000 a week, and $2,200 a week of that is going into fuel. $2,200 a week into fuel cost because it's such high mileage. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, I'm thinking about doing that. I'm just not sure. All right, let's go back over the load board and see if we can find something better. Two step deck trailers stacked. Hmm. One thing that I was kind of hoping to see is the oil and gas industry. It doesn't seem like many Landstar agents have oil and gas contracts. I don't see a whole lot of oil and gas loads on Landstar's load board. But that could be because they move a lot of loads on something other than dry van, like flatbed. I would suspect that a lot of the oil and gas loads would be flatbed. So maybe that's the reason I don't see many of them, is because I'm not a flatbed driver. What is this load listed at a penny? Why would they list a load at a penny? It's like they don't want anybody calling on this load. Need 2 5/16 ball hitch. That's not like necessarily power only. There is a category in here somewhere in the trailer types for like ball hitch or something like that. Dualies or something. This is I don't know why they would list it at a penny a mile. or no, it's not even a penny a mile. Its total revenue is a penny. It's like they're just trying not to get phone calls. Let's look at this other load that's listed at some really cheap, just fake rate. It's a loaded 20-foot container on a chassis. Going from Three Forks, Montana to Sugar Creek, Missouri at $1 a mile. I think that they're actually trying to move it at that price. I thought that was like some kind of fake rate. Because you'll see agents just listing loads at fake rates. One thing that I noticed disappeared, I've seen it on the load board several times, and I've been calling it out on my load board videos, is there was a dedicated run between Dayton, Ohio and Chicago, Illinois. I forget who it was for, but I'd been seeing it on the load board for a couple of months, and so I started talking about it, and now it's gone. So I think somebody booked that dedicated run. Not seeing it on the board anymore. All right, let's go back. Oh, let me switch this. It's time me out again. Let's go back and search for. Okay, never mind. It redid my search. It didn't save this page. It doesn't separate the pages. It just saves them all together. I'm going to try to do. We've already looked at power only for the entire country. Let me just double check and see if I have team no, agent, direct shipper yes. Okay. So let's just see what big paying loads there are. We have an Eaton, New Jersey round trip load. Massive 5,000 mile load. It's paying a mediocre rate. I'm not going to drive up to New Jersey for that load. Let's see what it says. No comments. So it's a 40,000 pound, it's a max weight hazmat load that's going to Las Vegas. So Eaton, New Jersey to Las Vegas and then back to Eaton, New Jersey. And it's the 11th through the 22nd. Huh. I was thinking this might be a convention, but you're not staying there very long. You might maybe be there for like 1 or 2 days and then turn around and come back. This might be a convention load. Oh, wow. A load coming out of Alaska, going to Knoxville, Tennessee. That's rare. It's rare to see loads coming out of Alaska. And the rate per mile is really bad. $2.30 a mile. And you're going to get roughly 70% of that, which is really, really cheap. $2.30. It's $1.61 a mile to drive 4,500 miles. All right, I was mainly just looking through here to see if there was like some kind of convention, like a tour. We used to see tours on the load board all the time. I haven't seen like whenever you would search Landstar's load board back when we were at all-time high freight market, like there would be 5 or 10 loads at the top of the load board that would be listed at like $100,000, and it would be these 1 to 3 month tours where you'd just be driving somebody around for like a concert tour or a holiday tour or whatever kind of tour. They never paid very well. So I never even looked into doing one. And then when we had the lockdowns with the Wuhan virus, all of the tours required you to get like all of these experimental vaccines and everything. And like you had to go through a whole bunch of hoops to do all the tours. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing all that crap. Mm. All right. Yeah, I was just mainly looking at that to see if there were any like big tours or something. So we got container van 45. All right, let's do Oklahoma City. Let's do a 300-mile radius. Let's do a destination of Cincinnati, Ohio. Oh, that's not Ohio. And let's do, I don't want to do a huge radius. Let's do a 100-mile radius around Cincinnati. 0 loads. Oh, I got the minimum revenue at 5,000 still. Let's get rid of that. 15 loads. All right, let's see what's there. Let's see what we got. What we're looking at right now is a load to possibly get us to Cincinnati so that we can start running that dedicated. Let's see if there's anything to get us to Cincinnati. Oh, I like this distance thing they have here. Just a second, I heard a weird noise. I'm not sure if it was a dog yelping or what that was, but let me pull up my cameras really quick. Oh, my neighbor's loading stuff into his pickup. The neighbor directly across the street from me. This is the main reason I installed cameras on my house is because whenever I hear a weird noise outside, my house it's so big that it's hard for me to go look around the outside of the house. Like it takes like 5 minutes of me running around looking out windows to be able to get a view all the way around the house to see what's going on. And I got tired of doing that every time I would hear something weird outside. So I installed the cameras so that if I heard something weird outside, I could just look and see what's going on. All right, let's go back over to the load board. All right, north, what do we got? What do we got? Okay, so the distance thing, this is really cool. So I have 2 distance parameters. I have a distance from origin and a distance from destination, and it's giving me a split. It's 187 miles from origin and 47 miles from destination. That's really cool. That's one thing that I like about the new load board. So it is 41,358 pounds, and it picks up tomorrow. Baxter Springs, Kansas to Oakwood, Missouri. A max weight, consumer goods or appliances. And it's that UNV agency that's always posting mediocre to bad loads. Let's see what the comments on this say. No comments. So if I were ready to roll out right now, I don't know if I'd take that load just because of the weight. It's really, really, really heavy. My truck is heavier than a normal truck, so I don't typically haul loads over 40,000 pounds because a lot of these customers, they only tally up the weight of the actual cargo. They forget to add in the weight of all of the dunnage, like the pallets, the cardboard, all the stuff used, all the packaging materials for their cargo. They usually know what their cargo weighs, but they forget to add in all of the weight of the materials used around their cargo. So there's typically 1 to 5,000 pounds of extra weight in the trailer. Some of these customers are really good at knowing exactly how much weight that they're putting in the trailer, but a lot of them they just completely half-ass it. Like a really common way that they determine weight in the trailer is like, let's say you're shipping boxes of Clorox bleach. Clorox bleach in gallon jugs that's inside of a box. Well, they know how much each like box is because they pay by weight to have it shipped to them or whatever. Or it's listed like they let's say that they know exactly how much a single gallon jug weighs. Well, they know that they have like 3,000 jugs in the trailer that they're loading in. So they will just multiply the exact weight of 1 gallon jug by the number of jugs in there, and they'll tell you that that's the load of the trailer. Well, they're not counting in the cardboard boxes that they're in, or the saran wrap that it's wrapped in, or the plastic wrap, or whatever, or the pallets that they're on, or they're not factoring in any of that stuff into the weight. So I typically avoid anything over 40,000 pounds because it can be a nightmare trying to scale that kind of stuff. But if the load is actually 41,358 pounds, then I can scale that. Hmm. This North Little Rock. This is the VAM agency. This is a good agency. VAM has contracts with Saya and FedEx. I don't know who else they have contracts with, but I've run, I think I've only run FedEx loads with them, but I've seen, I've called them on loads that were Saya. Yeah, this is an LTL run because this is the copy paste comment that they put in all of their LTL loads. Drop and hook on both ends, non-hazmat lane, weight can range, but is almost always 35,000 pounds or below. Well, they've changed it to 35,000 pounds or below. They used to say 32,000 pounds or below, and that was wrong. Every single load that I've hauled for them has been between 35 and 40,000 pounds. So I would say that the average that I've hauled has been somewhere around 38,000 pounds. The description is ABF Freight. So I think that is the LTL company this loads for is ABF. So VAM has contracts with several LTLs. They have FedEx, Saya, and it looks like this one's ABF. So there are a couple of loads here that I could take. Dayton, Ohio is pretty close to Cincinnati. Let's zoom in on the map here. Oh, I love that on the new load. This is another thing I like about the new load board. On the old load board, I would have to go full screen or I would have to use control. I would have to press control down to be able to zoom on the map. But on the new load board, I can just use my scroll wheel without having to do any weird stuff to zoom in and out on the map. So Dayton, Ohio is just north of Cincinnati, and the Ford place for that dedicated run is on the north side of Cincinnati up here in Sharonville. So this is delivering pretty close to where that dedicated run starts. And North Little Rock, Arkansas, I'm over here in Oklahoma City, so I would have to deadhead. It's a significant deadhead to go from Oklahoma City all the way over to North Little Rock and then drive up there to Dayton. And we compare that to that Baxter Springs load that was going to Oakwood, Missouri. Let's take a peek at that thing. Or Oakwood, Ohio, not Oakwood, Missouri. And that's also going to Dayton. Oakwood, Ohio is Dayton as well. And it's right on the way. So the Baxter Springs load pays more. It's less out of route miles, but it's a max weight load. This is mainly flatland driving. Missouri is a lot of rolling hills, but there's not really any mountains. So you're not going to like really crush yourself on fuel mileage. But it is a max weight load, so it is going to cost quite a bit more in fuel. But the Baxter Springs load would definitely be a better load. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to try to find some load to get me to Cincinnati. And then I'm going to start running that Cincinnati dedicated. It's basically going back and forth between Cincinnati and Kansas City, hauling for Ford. And I don't know what the trailer weights are. I think they're around 35,000 pounds. So it's heavy loads, but it's not max weight loads. Let's go back over here. Let me switch this while I agency, is it YGM? No, it's YOZ agency. Let's just do an agency search right here. And what is the listed weight on this? 35,000 pounds is what they have the listed weight as. So we don't really know how heavy these loads are. If these are like really heavy loads, let me check my email and see if they put anything in the email. They sent me an email with load information. And yeah, there's nothing in here about load weight. That's something I should have asked about because that is going to make a big difference in how much money you can make on these loads with how high the fuel prices are. If these are max weight loads, then yeah, that could be the difference. That could make a 1 to 2 mile per gallon difference versus a light versus a heavy load. Like if these are really light loads, I might be able to get 7.5 or 8 miles per gallon. But if they're really heavy loads, I might be getting like 5 to 6 miles per gallon. And that makes a huge difference. Let's go back over to the spreadsheet here. And I can just, like right now, it's set for 7 miles per gallon. And my profit is $1.29 per mile. And this is at the $827 fuel surcharge that they have it listed at for this week. The fuel surcharge just went up dramatically this week. So the fuel prices are still around $5 per gallon. Let me just double check that. Yeah, they're a little over 450 a gallon is the cheapest place just outside Kansas City is a little over 450 a gallon. And then as you get over to Cincinnati, no, these prices are crazy. Where's a place that's cheap? Where's a place that's cheap? All right, there's nowhere near Cincinnati that's cheap. There is one place. Wait, let me. What's my route that I'm gonna be taking? Wow, yeah, these prices are crazy. Um, yeah, my price. is 566 plus 61. That's 627. I think it's around 627 a gallon. I'm not seeing anywhere. All the prices are around 627 a gallon. There's a Flying J in St. Louis that's $6 a gallon. So yeah, the fuel prices are pretty much 6 to 627 a gallon after discount, including fuel tax, everywhere along the route except right near Kansas City. My fuel price is about 5.7 or no, it's 433 plus 30, so 463. So 463 right outside Kansas City, and then everywhere else along the route is 6 to 630 a gallon. It's like $1.40 a gallon more expensive everywhere else. That is crazy. All right, so let's recalculate this fuel. So $5 a gallon average is unlikely. Let's go in between 630 and 460. So let's go with 550 average fuel price. It's going to be 550 a gallon. So my profit is only $1.22 a gallon. And if my miles per gallon go down to, let's say, 6 miles per gallon, this is mainly flat land. So even with a heavy load, I should probably still be able to get 6 miles per gallon. If it's a max weight load, it might get down to 5.5 miles per gallon. So at 6 miles per gallon, my profit is $1.09 per mile. That means on a week, are these numbers not changing? Oh, yeah. Okay, um, so yeah, 6 miles per gallon. What I would make after fuel cost on an average week would be $3,274. With the current fuel prices at 6 miles per gallon, we're looking at $3,200, $3,274 a week on average. If I'm able to do 2.5 loads per week. And they said that there is a consistency issue. So I might only be able to do 2 loads per week. That puts me at $2,619 a week if I'm only able to do 2 loads per week. And that we still have, business expenses and paying the driver that comes out of that. So if I had normal business expenses, that would be about $1,200 a week. So 26 minus 12 would put us at $1,400 per week. And then you have to pay the driver. Yeah, this is looking atrocious. Now that we put in new fuel numbers, this is looking really, really bad. The fuel prices are much higher now than when I looked at it just a few days ago. The fuel prices basically everywhere outside of Kansas City have gone up dramatically. Kansas City fuel prices are still roughly about the same, but the rest of the route, the fuel prices have gone up dramatically. So if I can consistently fuel up, let's use best case scenario and say that I only ever fuel up in Kansas City, which it's 1,200 miles round trip, you might not be able to do that. There's going to be times when you're probably going to have to put in fuel somewhere else. But let's say that I'm paying $4.70 a gallon. And let's say I'm getting 7.5 miles per gallon. Well, that changes dramatically. Now we're looking at $4,144 per week after fuel cost. That's like $1,000 a week more that I'm making. So the amount of fuel that you're using is going to make a huge difference in whether or not you can make money on this load, on whether or not this load is profitable. The amount of fuel you're using. And let me pause this and do some searches online and see if I can find out what the weight on these Ford loads are. I can't find any info on the weights. It can be anything from a full load of transmissions, which can be really heavy, to just empty racks. I found comments of people that were loading up out of Sharonville, where the transmission plant, and they were taking empty racks out of there. So I'm not sure if we're taking transmissions out of Sharonville to Kansas City, or let's do a search. Ford, Kansas City. Let's see what the Ford place is in Kansas City. Ford assembly plant. So it looks like they actually put the vehicles together in Kansas City. They assemble them in Kansas City. And it looks like this is pickup trucks. I'm seeing they have several buildings in this area, and I'm seeing some of them listed as truck plants or truck paint and truck body. There's a building that says truck body and one that says truck paint. So it's most likely hauling transmissions from the transmission plant in Sharonville to Kansas City. And then what would you be hauling from Kansas City to the transmission plant? Another thing that they told me is that almost all of the money on this load is from Cincinnati to Kansas City. To go back from Kansas City to Cincinnati, they said that leg of the load pays nothing. All right, I just emailed them and asked them if they could tell me what the weights are. And yeah, it looks like you're hauling transmissions from Cincinnati to Kansas City, and then you're hauling racks or something back. So they said that it's 35 to 42,000 pounds going from Cincinnati to Kansas City, and then Kansas City to Cincinnati is 15 to 20,000 pounds. So most likely you're hauling transmissions from Cincinnati to Kansas City, really heavy max weight load. And then Kansas City back to Cincinnati is like a 15 to 20,000 pound. It's not a light load. It's like a medium weight load. And it's probably just like probably racks. It's probably the materials that they use to ship the transmissions in. You're returning them back to Sharonville. So, with that being said, with all of that information, And they were pretty good at responding to my email really fast. They responded to my email really quick. I tried to say fast and quick at the same time, and it came out with quack. Let's close out of some of these windows I got open here. And all of the load board windows timed out. All right, so let's go back to the spreadsheet. And realistically, we're looking at 5. If I try really, really hard to only fuel up just outside of Kansas City, and if I need to fuel up outside of Kansas City, then I just put enough to get me to Kansas City. Like just throw in 50 gallons. Don't top off fuel anywhere except Kansas City. I can probably average, we'll say $5.30 a gallon fuel cost, because the fuel is just so insane everywhere else. You know, $6 to $6.30 a gallon after discount. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me show you what it's like in Kansas City. So this is the cheapest place along the route, and it's a TA in Oak Grove, Missouri. On the let's switch this over to just me. This is on the east side of Kansas City, and this is the cheapest fuel on the route. The pump price is $5.39 plus 6, so it's basically $5.40. So it's $5.39 and 9/10. So $5.46 a gallon is the pump price. Landstar discount is 76 cents a gallon. So $5.46 pump price. The state fuel tax is 29 cents. So I'm paying $4.33 a gallon. And then if you throw in the 30 cents a gallon fuel tax, I'm paying $4.66 a gallon. That's the cheapest on the route. Now let's find one of the places, if I have to get fuel over in the Indianapolis, Cincinnati area, and fuel goes up dramatically as soon as you get past that. Like just let me go over here and take a look at other places in Missouri. Just a few miles down the road from that place we were looking at, it is 446 plus 30 would be 476. So that's only 10 cents a gallon more expensive. And then it jumps up dramatically. The next cheapest place is 565, 555. Yeah, 555 a gallon. So it jumps up by almost $1 a gallon by the time you get to St. Louis. Is that the route we're taking? Yeah, we're going through St. Louis. Yeah, we're going through St. Louis. Yeah, it goes up by $1 a gallon just getting to the other side of Missouri, and it stays up at that price throughout the rest of the route. See if I can find some place that's cheaper than 5. There's a 564 a gallon. Effingham. What's Effingham? 525. So Effingham is the cheapest place. Effingham, Illinois is the cheapest place along the route once I get past those two places in Missouri. Once I get out of Missouri, Effingham, Illinois is the cheapest place on the route. And it is $6.62 a gallon is the pump price. So it's $6.55 and 9/10, which is $6.56 plus 6 cents a gallon for the cash discount. So $6.62 a gallon is the pump price. The Landstar discount is only 56 cents a gallon. And the tax credit is 73 cents a gallon, which is massive. So once you add in the tax back to that 5.25 a gallon, it's $6 a gallon. My fuel cost after discount, including fuel tax, is about $6 a gallon. So we're looking at 466 cheapest, $6 a gallon second cheapest. If I have to fuel up outside of Kansas City, then I'm going to be paying $6 a gallon. And if I fuel up near Kansas City, it's 466 a gallon. So I think 530 a gallon is very reasonable. If, you know, I have to occasionally put in 50 gallons outside of Kansas City. My miles per gallon is not going to be 7.5. It's going to be probably closer to 6.5 because I'm going to be hauling a lot of heavy loads. So realistically, we're looking at, after fuel cost, if I'm able to do 2 loads per week. They said that the average is 2.5 loads per week, and maybe that is true for like their top. They have like 13 to 15 drivers doing this load. So for like their top 10 drivers, maybe they are doing 2.5 loads per week. But the drivers at the back end, which I would be, are probably lucky to get 2 loads per week because he said there's going to be consistency issues. So at 2 loads per week, you're looking at $2,800 a week after just fuel cost. And if I'm able to get the 2.5 loads per week that they're talking about, that's $3,578, almost $3,600 a week. So at $2,800 a week after just fuel cost, that is not very good money. And you could be looking at, I'm probably not going to bother scaling the load because they're loading these trailers like all day, every day with the exact same thing. So the chance that the trailer is going to be overweight is extremely low. So I'm probably not going to bother scaling and spending, you know, $15, $20 to scale every load. Well, it would just the loads coming out of Kansas City are light enough that you wouldn't need to scale them, but the loads coming out of Sharonville, Cincinnati, need to be scaled. Anything over 36,000 pounds should be scaled, but I probably wouldn't bother scaling them to save money and to save time. Man, 2,800 a week, and that's just after fuel cost. You still have all of your other expenses coming out after that. My expenses are lower than most people, but if you have like average expenses of like $1,200 a week, fixed costs, I mean, that's putting you down to $1,600 a week. You know who makes $1,600 a week? Like a low seniority LTL driver. Like high seniority LTL drivers make $2,000 to $2,400 a week. People who are low on the totem pole, like just starting out, are making like $1,500 a week with line haul driver, you know, LTL companies. So you're making company driver money on this load. This is a company driver money load. I don't know, man. Let's think about like this. What is the kind of consistent money that I can get coming out of let's compare this. I don't know. The consistency is the really big thing. If I take loads from Dallas to Portland, and then let's say those window loads don't get canceled. And let's go back over the load board. Let's say that those window loads, they don't go out of business. What are we looking at here? These are the loads that I'm looking to get this is the search to get me to Cincinnati. Yeah, it's so let's just look at loads coming out of Dallas really quick. Container van, Oklahoma City, 300 miles going to Cincinnati. Let's do a minimum revenue of $4,000. 75 loads. There we go. All right. We got a load that was just posted, Springdale, Arkansas to Wilmington, North Carolina. 15,000 pounds of metals. It has 8 extra stops on it, 9 total. 2,000 miles, 381 a mile. That looks like a pretty good load. I don't like going that far east. Let's see if there's any notes on it. I'm pretty sure there are notes on this because I recognize the agency, and there's some girl that puts in the comment section, you know, her name and call her. Yeah, ask for Tracy, extension 224. 1 drop in Louisiana, 1 AG, 5 Florida, 1 North Carolina. 1 drop in Louisiana, 1 in AG. I think she meant GA for Georgia. And 5 in Florida and 1 in North Carolina. Aluminum window frames. Accessorial pay. There's stop pay. There's no unload pay. So this is no touch. You don't have to unload. Let's see. The fuel surcharge looks like it's probably around 76 cents a mile, what it's supposed to be. It's 14.35.60 divided by the mileage of 1956. It's 73.3. So 73 cents a mile. So it's a little below what it's supposed to be paying. All right, Fort Smith, Arkansas to Milwaukee, Oregon. Let's figure out how much I would make on this load. So let me bust out the calculator here. So let's figure out what the line haul is. So it's 7262.05 minus the fuel surcharge of 1513.3. That's 5748.75 times 0.65. That's $3,736.68.75. And now let's add in the fuel surcharge of 1513.3. So $5,249.98.75. The stop pay, I didn't bother, moving. The stop pay, I get 65% of that. So I just left that as part of the line haul. You get 100% of unload pay, but 65% of stop pay. So I would make $52.49.98 gross to the truck on 2,000 miles. What's the mileage? What's the divided by 2045? So that's 256, almost 257 a mile that I would be making. And if I go back over to the spreadsheet, my gross pay for doing just 2 loads on the Ford account would be a little over $4,800. So $4,800 versus $5,200. So I would make $400 more doing the Oregon load. And I would be running 400 miles, well, 300 miles less, about 300 miles less on the Oregon load. And if it's costing me about $1 a mile, that's another $300 that I'm saving, or that it's costing me, however you want to look at it. So that increases the difference from $400 to $700. It's let's say $600 because it's not $1 a mile. It's not a full dollar a mile. Actually, yeah, it probably is. Yeah, fuel cost is close to $1 a mile, especially for the West Coast areas. And that's a lot of mountain driving. So yeah, it is close to $1 a mile for fuel cost. And then coming back, hmm, it's really, man. So I could take that load to Oregon and make $5,200 gross to the truck, and then bring a load of windows back and probably make around $8,000 gross to the truck. So if we don't look at the fuel costs, we just look at the gross, that would be like $13,000 for basically 2 weeks. And this load is paying about $4,800 if you're only doing 2 loads. If you're doing 2.5, that's $6,000. But we're going with 2 loads because they told us there are consistency issues. So you're looking at like $9,600 over the course of 2 weeks versus probably around $1,300 or $13,000. So probably $3,400 more over the course of 2 weeks, but it's inconsistent. I would probably end up setting for 1 to 2 weeks while I wait on a load. And there's a bunch of deadhead mileage. And I burn a lot of extra fuel doing these multi-stop deliveries. Because you're not just driving to one place and then unloading. You're driving all around town all day long doing a whole bunch of unloads. And then you go to another town and do the same thing over and over again. So the fuel cost on the window loads is much, much higher than a normal load. Yeah, I think I'm just going to do the Cincinnati loads. I just need to find a load to get me to Cincinnati, and I'm just going to do the Cincinnati loads. They don't pay great, but they're consistent. So I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. So let's let's go back and look for a Cincinnati load. Why did it clear all this stuff out? Damn it. Container, van, needing power only, max weight 45,000. Team, no. Direct shipper, yes. Picking up in Oklahoma City within 300 miles and delivering to Sharonville, Ohio within 150 miles. Minimum rate per mile of $3. All right, let's see what we got. So we got the Baxter Springs to Oakwood, Ohio. Really, really heavy load. So it's basically the same loads I've already looked at. We do have a load that was posted 33 minutes ago, Coffeyville, Kansas to Brooks, Kentucky. I'm not sure if that was on the board when I looked at it a minute ago. It is also a really heavy max weight load that's paying considerably cheaper than the Baxter Springs load. So I don't know why in the hell I would choose this load over the Baxter Springs load. All right, so yeah, I think I'm just going to set up my load alerts to try to find a load to get me to Cincinnati. And then I'm going to run that dedicated run between Cincinnati and Kansas City. And we're going to see massive fuel price fluctuations. That's my expectation. Is all right. For the rest of the load board, we're not going to be looking at the load board. For the rest of the video, it's going to be me talking about what's going on in the world. Let me check the news and see, because this is a minute by minute, second by second situation. Let's see. There's hardly anything in the news about the war. There's on Fox News, there's only one article, and it's an old article about something that happened a few days ago on the war. Oil prices climb as Trump calls Iran proposal unacceptable. This is on CNN. And it's a bunch of like entertainment news, celebrity gossip crap. Martin Short speaks for the first time about nightmare of his daughter's death. I don't really care what Martin Short thinks or has to say about anything. These are not news channels. This is media. This is entertainment media. Let's try news.google. Here's another article about Trump rejecting Iran's ceasefire proposal or peace proposal or whatever proposal. All right, so yeah, there's nothing really new in what's going on. And if you want to hear me talk for a couple of hours about what's going on, then I made a video dedicated to that a few days ago. So what is my expectation? My expectation is that fuel prices are steadily going to rise. The manipulation by Trump is going to be reduced because of all of the legal stuff that's happening in regard to insider trading from market manipulation. So I think that the market manipulation that's been happening is going to be reduced, and that's going to allow oil and gas prices to go up. The financial markets have been lowering the prices based off of statements that Trump has been making that are completely fictitious. They're false. They're incorrect. It's just market manipulation. And with that market manipulation dying off, it's probably not going to go away completely, but with it dying off, it's going to allow oil and gas prices to rise more rapidly. And I think that oil and gas prices are probably going to price in somewhere around $150 to $200 a barrel. That is a significant increase. So we could see very high fuel prices within the next couple of months. There's also a lot of things happening. I talked about this in my last video. There is elasticity in the supply chain. And the longer that this disruption goes on, the more like actual failures we have. Like right now, we haven't really run out of anything. We've just had shortages of stuff. We haven't had as we go on, we're going to start to get to points where we run out of reserves. We run out of elasticity and things just start snapping. I read an article where someone who's supposedly an expert said that the United States oil reserves will last until somewhere around June or July. Will the United States allow our reserves to completely run out? No, that is highly unlikely. If they think that we're going to get to that point, they're going to start taking measures. They're going to start restricting fuel. They're going to start doing something to get the fuel to last longer. They might be restricting travel. There's lots of possible things that they can do to try to extend the reserve capacity. Because if we completely run out, that gets really, really bad. So we could have this would be absolutely crazy. Now, this isn't something I've been thinking about for a long time. I just thought of this, I'm rattling around this in my head right now. If we start to get to the point where we could potentially run out of fuel, how would the government allow industries that need fuel to continue operating? If the high prices aren't enough to get people to stop driving that don't need to be driving, we could have some form of lockdowns. We've already had lockdowns in the past, and we could have a new form of lockdowns where one of the things that we had with lockdowns previously was that you were not allowed to drive around unless it was necessary travel. They shut down parks and all recreational activities so that people couldn't drive around for recreational activities. And this didn't stop these fucking idiots. I'm sorry for the language, but it pisses me off to just think about it, because I know people that did this stupid shit. We had the lockdowns. They shut down the parks. They shut down everything. And they told people, do not go out. Don't, go out places. And what did people do? Dumbasses, like somebody I know, went out and they bought camping equipment and they started going camping and kayaking and shit like that, because they could still do that. And in their tiny little smooth brain, they were like, well, I'm not, interacting with large groups of people, so this is okay. But in order to do that, you're still going out and you're going to the gas station. You're interacting with people at the gas station. You're interacting with people at the kayak store. You're interacting with people at, the camping supply store. You're interacting with tons and tons of people. You're doing exactly what they're telling you not to do. And these smooth brains they don't process that. He's not my friend, but somebody I know that was doing this and bragging about it, in his mind, he was obeying everything and he was adhering to the lockdowns and the no social interaction rules and all that stuff. But anyway, that's just a side rant. But we already have those mechanisms in place. We already have like a trial run of that. So we could have something where the government mandates that companies capable of working from home allow their employees to work from home. And they might force, recreational things like movie theaters to shut down. Because people just won't, if you tell companies to make people work from home, you tell people not to go out and drive unless they absolutely have to. Are they going to listen to you? No, they're going to work from home. But as soon as they get off work, they are going to go to the movie theater. And what you're going to have a lot of things happen is a big problem we have with work from home is people don't work from home. They will go and travel. You'll have people like go to McDonald's and, they'll take their laptop with them and they'll be traveling around. They'll actually be driving more when they're supposed to be working from home than if they were to commute back and forth to work. Because you have these people that smooth brains that will just, they'll drive around town and they won't actually do work. This is the reason a lot of companies can't stand to work from home is because people just can't be trusted. If you don't have somebody standing over them, micromanaging them every second of the day, you can't trust them to do anything. That's the reason a lot of companies, the productivity plummets with work from home with most businesses because people just cannot work without direct supervision to the level of micromanagement. People just can't be trusted. But anyway, we could have some form of lockdowns to reduce fuel usage. We could have all kinds of restrictions happen. I expect that things will probably be put in place within the next month. They're not going to wait until we run out of fuel reserves. They're probably going to start doing something this month. They might, like a lot of countries have already started putting on export limits. Like one of the things that keeps getting perpetuated is that the United States produces more oil than it uses. Yeah, that's technically true, but we import and export oil. And there's no limit on our exports right now. So we might see a limit put on our exports, which will not help us because the refineries are designed to process certain types of oils. Every oil field has a different type of oil. Oil is not oil. And if we restrict exports, what are they going to do with that oil? That oil is designed certain refineries are designed to process certain oil. So we might not be able to do anything with that oil. And if we do that, other countries might do the same. And we might get into a situation where we have an abundance of oil we can't use. And the oil that we need is no longer coming in. So if we do export restrictions and other countries do export restrictions, that could actually make the problem in the United States worse. I don't know what the exact refinery situation is in the United States, but we could see a lot of things happening. They're already floating the idea of getting rid of fuel tax or severely reducing fuel tax to help with the crazy high fuel prices. I don't know if that will affect truckers or if that's just going to be on the, gas tax. I don't know if that's going to be the IFTA tax. They probably won't help truckers. They'll probably just reduce the regular gas tax for consumers. But there's a lot of things that they're thinking about doing right now that'll probably be implemented within the next 1 to 2 months. As prices for fuel rise dramatically, as shortages start happening, and as our fuel reserves continue depleting. Fuel reserves around the world are depleting. And from what I've been hearing, we're going to start running into reserves, running out in approximately 1 to 2 months. is when reserves are going to start running out throughout the world. I've heard all kinds of things on like fuel reserves and how much fuel reserves countries have. One of the things I've heard is that China has some of the largest fuel reserves, some of the largest oil reserves in the world. Like their fuel reserves. I heard somebody say that they had 90 days, and I heard somebody else say that they had 9 months. I don't know which one is true. Let's see what Google says. How much fuel reserve does China have? As of early May 26, China holds the largest strategic oil reserves, with estimates placing their total stockpile between 1.4 and 1.5 billion barrels. To put that into some kind of context, the entire world uses about 100 million barrels per day. That means that China has enough oil reserves to provide the entire world with oil for about 14 to 15 days. This massive, largely undisclosed and rapidly increased inventory is designed to provide over 90 days of consumption, serving as a buffer against supply chain shocks. So China has a stockpile of oil for about 90 days. So whoever I heard that said 9 months misread 90 days and thought 90 days was 9 months. So it's 90 days, not 9 months. That's not that much. So China has about 90 days. So does that mean they're going to run out of oil in 90 days? No. If they have, a deficit of like 5 million barrels per day, then it'll be 5 million barrels to get up to 1.4 billion. So how long would that last? What is China's current oil deficit? As of May 26, China is experiencing a severe immediate oil import deficit driven by the Iran Strait of Hormuz, blah, blah, blah. Crude oil imports fell 20% month on month to 8.2 million barrels per day, lowest in nearly 4 years, and a 30% drop. So they're down approximately 3.5 million barrels per day out of their pre-war levels were somewhere around 11.7 million barrels per day, and they're down to about 8.2 million barrels per day now. So they've lost 3.5 million barrels per day. So how long will it take them to run out of reserves at their current deficit? So let's do 1,400 divided by 3.5. 400 days. So they should be able to last about 400 days before they run out of their reserves. So over a year. They have over a year of reserve capacity at their current deficit. So they're not running out of oil anytime soon. Prices will go up, but they're not likely to run out. And nobody knows for sure if this is true. This is just a guesstimate because China is like extremely controlling with information. It's really hard to get information out of China. Everything comes out of the government or the state-run media. So you're getting whatever information that they want to provide. Anyway, let me go heat up this cold coffee, drink this last splash, refill it, and then I'll come back up here and wrap up the video. So let me pause this for a minute. All right, we're all filled up. we're refilled on the coffee. I think it's too hot to drink right now. But so let's wrap this up by talking about more of the Iran global supply chain stuff. So a lot of the rhetoric has died down. There seems to be a suppression of information around the Iran conflict. There's just the amount of media coverage on it has dropped dramatically. And if you watch my video where I talked about the supply chain in Iran, you'll notice that whenever I was doing like searches on news.google and DuckDuckGo News, two of the biggest search engines in the world, I was searching for news on the supply chain, and it wasn't coming up with articles about Iran or the Strait of Hormuz. It was coming up with like infomercials stuff, completely unrelated. So like there is a tremendous amount of suppression around information right now. I think that they're terrified of panic. So I think that the government is trying to suppress information, and I think that they've probably contacted media outlets and told them to suppress information and like reduce the amount of bad stuff that they talk about to not create panic. So it seems like the government and media, the state-run media, is focused right now on avoiding panic, because if people find out how bad things are, if people start panic buying and resellers get involved, we could have a crisis within a matter of days. But at its current rates, we're probably not going to start seeing shortages for another month or two. Maybe a little bit after that. Yeah, it's probably going to be a couple months, we might see some stuff within the next 1 to 2 months, but most of the shortages will likely be longer than that. But if people start panic buying, it could get really bad really quick. We don't even have to have shortages. And if panic buying starts, this is something I talked about in the supply chain video, is that during the lockdowns, there was never a shortage of toilet paper. We were actually producing much more toilet paper than normal, but we were constantly sold out on the store shelves because of panic buyers and resellers. There was an abundance of toilet paper. So that right there goes to show you the impact that panic buying and resellers can have on shortages and on prices and on the market, on the supply chain. So that's the reason the government is so terrified of panic, is because panic can oftentimes be worse than the problem. Human beings are not the brightest species, but what is likely going to happen, I don't know. All the information that I have available tells me that there is no end in sight. I don't see anything to suggest that the Strait of Hormuz is going to reopen and that this supply chain issue is going to be resolved. We have a lot of things that just take too long to fix. So first of all, with the negotiations between the United States, Israel, and Iran, Israel has been trying to talk the United States into going to war with Iran for decades. Israel is going to do everything that they can to stop this war from ending. If we ever have any kind of ceasefire or peace treaty start up, then Israel's probably going to do something to try to, cause it to fail. Like whenever the ceasefire started with the United States, Israel, and Iran, Israel did the largest attack of the war on Lebanon immediately when immediately after the ceasefire started, to try to end the ceasefire. But it didn't work. Iran and the United States chose to continue the ceasefire, even though Israel tried to ruin it. So Israel does not want this war to end. They're going to do everything they can to keep it going. The United States does want the war to end, but they're heavily influenced by Christian Zionists that have this cult religious belief system that they have to support Israel. So there's a lot of people in the United States that don't want the war to end. They want to support Israel. And then in Iran, the IRGC does not want the war to end. They want the world to suffer enough that they will never attack Iran again. And we haven't reached that level of suffering yet. So the IRGC doesn't want the war to end yet. They don't want the economic crisis to end yet. They want it to get really bad so that we will never do it again. It's like you have to use a nuclear weapon once to get people to realize how bad it is so that they'll never want, to mess with you again. The politicians in Iran do want the war to end. They're trying really hard to negotiate a deal. And from what I've heard, the politicians have actually gotten in trouble with the IRGC on numerous occasions for discussing things that they weren't supposed to be discussing, negotiating things like the Strait of Hormuz and nuclear that they're not supposed to be. From what I've heard, the Strait of Hormuz is a non-negotiation item, and nuclear is a non-negotiation item. Iran is not willing to negotiate at all on nuclear or the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, according to Iran, is theirs, and they are going to control it for the rest of time, and they're going to charge a toll on it. And there's going to be specific lanes that everybody's going to have to pass through, and everybody's going to have to check in with Iran. And they have procedures that they've been publishing about how to go through the Strait of Hormuz, who to contact. And, you get permission, you pay the toll, and then you have to follow a precise route through the Strait of Hormuz that you're provided with. That is the new normal for the Strait of Hormuz, according to Iran. So even if we sign a deal with Iran, the disruption to the Strait of Hormuz is not going to end. The traffic might increase. We're probably going to see more ships going through the Strait of Hormuz than right now, but it's still going to be a major disruption. So it's diplomacy, I don't think is an option. And I think that the only option available that is a definite going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is a full military invasion of Iran, which it would be very, very difficult to do. I could talk on a whole video about why that would be such, a bad thing. Like the president can't do that on his own. He would have to get the legislature to declare war. We would have to probably have a draft. It would take months, possibly years to accomplish. There would be a massive loss of life. I think that's the only option that looks like it has a fairly high chance of success. Nothing else appears to have much chance of success, but what it appears is happening right now is desperation on the part of the United States. The United States is keeping the invasion option way back here because they've been advised as to how bad that option is. Invasion is last resort. So it looks like they're just trying a whole bunch of other things, hoping that something works. They're throwing crap at the wall and hoping something sticks. They've tried escorting ships through. Iran shot at them, and they stopped that. Like, they've tried a whole bunch of things. And right now, what Israel is pushing for, and what Israel's been pushing for probably over a month, is attacking Iran's infrastructure. Israel has been telling Trump that if he destroys Iran's power grid and their desalination plants and all of their civilian infrastructure, that it will pressure the people into overthrowing the regime. That's what Israel is telling Trump. That is not true. It will be a massive escalation to the war. But Trump was threatening publicly to do that for weeks. He hasn't made that threat in the last week or two. But for a couple of weeks, every day he was coming out there threatening to destroy their power grid, because that's what Israel was telling Trump to do. It is embarrassing, and it also angers me. It pisses me off how much influence Israel has over our government. Trump is a puppet of Israel, and it pisses me off. the reason we're in this war is because Israel told Trump that Iran was going to have a nuclear weapon in 2 weeks. That wasn't true. And now Israel's trying to talk him into severely increasing the war, massive genocide, by knocking out their power grid and their civilian infrastructure. In the event of a long-term, large-scale loss of power, at least 90% of the population will die within 6 months to a year. That is every study I've ever seen that's ever been done on what would happen in the event of long-term, large-scale loss of power. And physically destroying a country's power grid, that is long-term, large-scale loss of power. That's 90% loss of population. That's the reason Trump was talking about wiping a civilization, off the map, and erasing a Persia from history and stuff like that, is because he was advised that 90% of the population would die if he destroyed all the power plants. People thought he was talking about a nuclear weapon. He wasn't. Power grid, knocking out civilian infrastructure, is potentially worse than using a nuclear weapon. The loss of life could be much larger by knocking out a country's power grid than using a nuclear weapon on a country. However, using a nuclear weapon on a country could also knock out the power grid, because an effect of a nuclear weapon is an electromagnetic pulse, which will knock out the power grid. So yeah, maybe a nuclear weapon is still worse. But anyway, if Trump listens to Israel, and Israel has been making statements recently that they're ready to restart the war at a moment's notice, and they have stated multiple times that once this war restarts, they're going to knock out Iran's power grid. So Trump may not be able to stop Israel from doing it. Who knows? If we attack Iran's power grid, Iran has said that they will retaliate by knocking out the civilian infrastructure, the power grids and desalination plants of all of the Gulf Coast countries and Israel. If Iran knocks out Israel's power plants, Israel will likely retaliate with a nuclear weapon. We could see a massive escalation in this war if Iran's power infrastructure, if their power plants are targeted. Another potential escalation is the Strait of Bab el-Mandab. Part of Iran's strategy is to shut down the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab el-Mandab to cripple the world economy. They have not attempted to shut down the Strait of Bab el-Mandab yet. That is a point of escalation that they have not used. Another point of escalation that they have not used is data cables, undersea data cables. Iran can destroy undersea data cables, and that will be a massive hit to the economy, the world economy, to knock out those undersea data cables. There's several things that Iran can do that can escalate this, that can make everything a lot worse. Iran can also target oil and gas and data centers throughout the region. There's a lot of economic and industrial targets that Iran could take out in the region that would be absolutely crippling, because there's still things moving. There's still things happening in the Middle East. Everything's not completely shut down. And Iran can shut down almost everything. So I see the likelihood of this ending to be very, very small. And I see the potential for escalation to be massive. Things have the potential of getting much, much, much worse. And the likelihood that things are going to get better is, in my opinion, very small. But who knows? There could be some amazing peace deal signed in the next 10 minutes, and Iran and the United States could work together and get the mines cleared in a week, and we could have the Strait of Hormuz fully operational within a week. And then the whole world can come together, sing Kumbaya, and rebuild all of the oil tankers and the oil depots and the refineries and everything else that's been destroyed or damaged. throughout the region, and everything can be back up to normal within a month or two. Like, that is a possibility. I don't think it's very likely, but it's a possibility. And I hope that happens. I really do. I hope it happens. But we'll see. My plan right now is I'm going to go ahead and get everything prepped to go back out over the road. And I'm going to try to book a load to get me to Cincinnati. And then I'm going to start running that Cincinnati-Kansas City dedicated. Just because I need consistent money flowing in. I think right now, it's not too difficult to find profitable loads. Over time, I think it's going to become more and more difficult to find profitable loads. 2 months from now, it may be very difficult to find profitable loads on the load board. So while I want to get out there and make money, even though the fuel costs are absolutely crazy and they're continuing to rise. I'm going to go out and make as much money as I can. People that have really high expenses are going to be struggling right now, and they're going to struggle more and more as time goes on. My expenses are low enough that I can outlast most people, and I can run things like this shitty dedicated run between Cincinnati and Kansas City. That's not like a very good run if you have high expenses. But with my low expenses, I can do that run and make pretty decent money. So I think I'm going to get out there and do that run. But anyway, hope you're having a good one. Best of luck out there. And, everything looks really bad in the future, but hopefully something changes and something turns around. There's some glimmers of hope. I keep hearing that Russia is seriously considering a peace deal with Ukraine. And then we have, Venezuela and Guyana, just south of the United States, have some of the largest oil reserves in the world. And that all of that has recently just been opened up to the world with the overthrow, the kidnapping of Maduro, and the, putting in a puppet government down there. Now the oil is going to start flowing out of that region. It's going to take time for that to happen. But, there are some positive things happening. If the Ukraine war ends and the Iran war ends all within the next couple of weeks, wow. Like, we could see things shift from doom and gloom. We're headed toward a Mad Max scenario. Things could shift wildly over here to where, like, everything looks amazing. The future is really bright. It could shift dramatically like that. I don't think that's likely. I don't think that's likely, but it's a possibility. I think it's more likely that China invades Taiwan than everybody becomes friends over the next month. But we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, have a good one. Bye.